Picture a scorching dusk in 1874, Sonoran Desert, where Caleb Rourke, a haunted ex-cavalryman, hammered wagon wheels to drown out screams from a betrayal he could never outrun. Once, he led soldiers to an Apache family's doom. Now, their ghosts shadowed his every step. When a missing supply train sparked whispers of Apache vengeance, Caleb followed its trail, not for redemption, but to escape. Yet the desert had other plans, binding him to a tribe he wronged and a woman whose eyes held both judgment and hope. Would truth save them or bury them all? This story's ending has left millions weeping. Hit subscribe, share your city, and discover what a single confession unveils under Red Rock's stars. The Sonoran Desert in 1874 baked under a merciless sun, its cracked earth like the skin of a man dead from thirst. Caleb Rourke's hammer struck iron against wood, each blow a dull thud echoing through his lonesome shack at the desert's edge. Sweat stung his eyes, but it couldn't blur the ghosts that haunted him. Apache faces, bound and pleading, from a raid he'd led years ago. He'd been a Union cavalry scout then, young and cocksure, guiding soldiers to a camp on bad orders. The screams of that family, the blood on his hands, drove him to desert his post. Now, at 30, he fixed wagons for drifters, a man the frontier had chewed up and spat out. His shack smelled of grease and mesquite smoke, its warped boards creaking under the heat. Tools hung on rusted nails, glinting faintly as the sun bled red through a single window. Caleb's fingers, calloused and scarred, worked with mechanical precision, but his mind wandered to that day. Hooves thundering, a mother's wail cut short. He shook his head, forcing the memory down like a bitter swallow of whiskey. Outside, the wind hissed, carrying whispers of trouble from the nearby town of Dusty Hollow. Caleb ignored it, just as he ignored the stares of passers-by who knew a deserter when they saw one. But trouble doesn't stay ignored. That evening, as he scrubbed grime from his hands, a rider galloped up, dust swirling like a devil's cloak. It was Amos, the saloon keeper, his face tight with urgency. "Caleb, you hear? Army supply train's gone missin' near Red Rock Valley. Folks are blaming the Apache, saying Harrow's marchin' to wipe 'em out." Caleb's gut twisted. Red Rock was Apache land, sacred and hard-won. He'd passed through once, seen their lodges tucked under crimson cliffs, eyes watching from shadows. Amos leaned closer, voice low. "They're saying it's vengeance for old raids, but I saw crates in that train, rifles, not flour. Something ain't right." Caleb's hammer stilled. Rifles meant smugglers, not Apache. He'd heard of men peddling guns to stir chaos, pinning blame on tribes to clear land for profit. His mind flashed to that long-ago raid, the lie he'd believed about hostiles. He'd been a pawn then. He wouldn't be now. "Ain't my fight," he growled, but the words tasted hollow. Amos spat into the dirt. "Keep telling yourself that, Rourke. Blood's comin', and you know it." The rider swung back onto his horse, leaving Caleb with the dying light and a choice he didn't want. By dawn, Caleb was packed. His old cavalry canteen rattled against a worn bedroll, his Colt strapped low on his hip. He told himself he was chasing answers, not redemption. Nobody forgave a man like him. The trail to Red Rock stretched brutally, a ribbon of dust flanked by saguaro claws and sun-bleached bones. Heat shimmered, warping the horizon. He rode hard, eyes scanning for tracks. By noon, he found them. Hoofprints, too clean for Apache ponies, and a splintered crate half buried in sand. He crouched, prying it open. Inside, a rusted rifle barrel gleamed, stamped with a smuggler's mark he'd seen in Tucson's back alleys. His jaw tightened. Amos was right. Someone was playing a deadly game. The wind shifted, carrying a faint tang of smoke. Caleb's hand went to his Colt, instincts flaring. He followed the trail deeper, past jagged boulders, until the ground dipped into a dry wash. There, he saw it, a wagon wheel shattered and drag marks leading to a ravine. His boots crunched as he approached, heart pounding like a war drum. At the ravine's edge, he froze. Below lay the supply train, or what was left of it. Canvas torn, crates smashed, and no bodies, not a single one. Whoever hit this train wasn't Apache. They didn't work this clean. But the blame would fall on Red Rock's tribe, and Harrow's soldiers wouldn't ask questions. Caleb's eyes narrowed, tracing the drag marks westward. He could turn back, let the desert swallow this mess. He'd survived by staying clear of fights that weren't his. But the weight of that old raid pressed on him, heavy as the sun overhead. Those Apaches in Red Rock, they weren't his kin, but they were caught in a trap he'd helped set years ago. He muttered a curse, slung his canteen tighter, and started walking. The trail led toward Red Rock Valley, where answers, and maybe judgment, waited under those blood-red cliffs. The trail to Red Rock Valley stretched unforgiving before Caleb Rourke, a gaunt promise of truth or ruin under cliffs that glowed like embers in the dying light. Dust stung his eyes as a sudden gust howled through the Sonoran Desert, 1874, the air thick with the threat of a storm. Caleb's boots sank into the sand, each step heavier than the last, his Colt a cold weight against his hip. The smuggler's rifle crate he'd found gnawed at his thoughts. Proof the Apache were framed. But proof meant nothing if he didn't reach their camp before Harrow's soldiers. The wind screamed louder, whipping his hat nearly off. He squinted, catching the flicker of lightning on the horizon. A sandstorm was coming, and it wouldn't wait. He pushed forward, the trail narrowing into a jagged canyon. Saguaro loomed like silent sentinels, their spines catching the last rays of the sun. Then it hit, a wall of sand, roaring like 1,000 hooves, blinding him. Caleb stumbled, his canteen torn from his grip, the world reduced to choking grit. He clawed at the ground, seeking shelter, but the storm drove him down a steep wash. Rocks tore his palms as he slid, crashing into a crevice where the wind's howl dulled to a moan. His chest heaved, sand clogging his throat. Darkness closed in, and for a moment, he thought the desert had claimed him. Hands gripped his arms, strong, unyielding. Shadows moved above, faces painted with ochre and black. Apache warriors, 6 of them, eyes hard as flint. One raised a carbine, its barrel glinting. Caleb froze, hands empty, knowing a wrong move meant death. "I ain't your enemy," he rasped, voice raw. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, gestured sharply. They bound his wrists with rawhide, tight enough to bite, and hauled him through the canyon. The storm's tail lashed behind, sand swirling like ghosts. Their camp nestled in Red Rock Valley, lodges of hide and stone, blending into cliffs that burned crimson under a clearing sky. Mesquite smoke curled upward, sharp and sweet, as women stirred pots and children darted between shadows. Caleb's captors shoved him to his knees before a lodge where an elder sat, his silver hair braided with beads, his face carved by decades of sun and sorrow. This was Tatsa, the heart of the tribe, his gaze heavy with judgment. Beside him stood a woman, tall and poised, her black hair bound with turquoise. Nalin, Taza's daughter, her eyes sharp as a blade's edge, studying Caleb like a crack in sacred stone. "You bring death," Nalin said, her English clipped, honed by Tucson's mission schools. "Why come?" Caleb met her stare, wrists burning. "To warn you. Soldiers are marching. They think you hit that train." Taza's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, letting silence press like a stone on Caleb's chest. The scarred warrior, Cale, their war leader, spat into the dirt. Lies. You're one of them. Caleb's jaw clenched. I found a crate, rifles, smugglers, not you. But Harrow won't care. Taza raised a hand, stilling the murmurs. He spoke in Apache, voice low, deliberate. Nalin translated, her tone cold. You stay. You eat nothing, drink nothing, until we know your truth. They left him under a cottonwood, unbound but watched, the camp's eyes like daggers. Hunger gnawed by dawn, thirst worsened by noon. Children stared, whispering. Warriors sharpened blades nearby. Nalin passed once, carrying a water jar, her glance unreadable. Caleb's mind raced. Harrow's men were close, maybe days away. He had to convince them, but trust was a currency he'd spent long ago. Night fell, the campfire's glow painting shadows on the cliffs. Drums pulsed, slow and deep, as Taza called a council. Caleb, dragged to the circle, felt every gaze. Cale's hand rested on a knife, daring him to falter. Taza spoke, Nalin's voice carrying his words. The bluecoats come for blood. If you speak the truth, prove it. If you lie, the desert takes you. Caleb's throat burned, but he stood. I was a soldier once, led a raid that took your kin. I ran from that shame. But I ain't running now. Let me face Harrow. I'll show him the smuggler's mark. Gasps rippled. Kyle lunged, restrained by Nalin's sharp command. Taza's staff struck the earth. You confess, Nalin translated. That buys you one night. Tomorrow, you speak, or bleed. The fire crackled, sealing Caleb's gamble. Nalin's eyes lingered, not soft, but searching, as if weighing his soul against the valley's fate. Nalin's eyes held Caleb's, a flicker of scrutiny that burned hotter than the council fire, daring him to prove his truth or face the desert's judgment. Dawn broke over Red Rock Valley in 1874, the Sonoran sky bruised purple, heavy with the threat of blood. Caleb Rourke stood at the camp's edge, the smuggler's rifle crate slung across his shoulder, its iron weight a grim reminder of the stakes. His wrists still ached from the rawhide, but Taza's counsel had spared him, for now. Kyle, the war leader, shadowed him, carbine in hand, his scar twitching with distrust. Move fast, white man, Kyle growled. Harrow's camp ain't far. Caleb nodded, his Colt heavy at his hip, and set out toward the soldiers' outpost, the valley's red cliffs looming like silent judges. The trail wound through a maze of boulders, dust coating his boots, the air sharp with sage and heat. Caleb's throat burned, parched from Taza's test of hunger and thirst, but Nalin's words echoed. Speak as equal, not supplicant. He clutched the crate tighter, its splintered wood biting his palm. The smuggler's mark, a coiled snake branded on the barrel, was his only leverage against Harrow's wrath. By midday, the outpost came into view. A sprawl of canvas tents, mules braying, and bluecoats polishing bayonets under a tattered flag. Caleb's gut churned. He'd worn that uniform once, before shame stripped it from him. A sentry's shout halted him, rifle snapping up. Caleb raised his hands, crate thudding to the dirt. I got business with Harrow, he called, voice steady despite the iron sights trained on him. They marched him through the camp, soldiers' eyes cold as winter stone, muttering, deserter, under their breath. Harrow's tent reeked of tobacco and wax, the man himself tall and gaunt, his mustache sharp as his ambition. Name yourself, Harrow snapped, leaning over a map of Red Rock. Caleb Rourke. I got proof the Apache didn't hit your train. He kicked the crate forward, the snake mark glinting in the lamplight. Harrow's eyes narrowed, fingers drumming his saber's hilt. You expect me to believe savages ain't behind this? Caleb held his gaze, remembering Nalin's warning. Smugglers, not Apache. That mark's from Tucson's black market. They're stirring trouble to clear the valley for profit. Harrow scoffed, but leaned closer, tracing the brand. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. "If you're lying, Rourke, I'll hang you myself." Caleb swallowed, throat dry as bone. "Check the ravine west of the wash. You'll find their tracks." Harrow barked orders, sending scouts, but his stare lingered, sharp with suspicion. "You stay. I ain't done with you." Caleb waited under guard, the camp's din, clanging steel, soldiers' curses, drowning his thoughts. He'd bought time, but trust was thin as a razor's edge. If Harrow's men found nothing, the Apache would pay in blood. As dusk fell, a shout broke the haze. Scouts returned, faces grim, hauling a crate matching Caleb's. Harrow stormed out, map crumpled in his fist. "Tracks lead to smugglers, as you said, but I ain't calling off my march. Apache or not, someone's bleeding for this." Caleb's heart sank. "You got your proof. Leave the valley be." Harrow's laugh was cold. "Proof doesn't change politics, Rourke. Stay out of my way." Night cloaked the desert as Caleb slipped from the camp, Harrow's threat ringing in his ears. He'd stalled the march, but not stopped it. The trail back to Red Rock felt longer, each step heavier under a starless sky. Then he saw it, smoke curling above the cliffs, acrid and wrong. His pulse quickened, boots pounding the dirt. Cresting a rise, he froze. Below, a cluster of Apache tents smoldered, flames licking at hide and pole. A boy's body lay in the dust, arrow-pierced, his eyes wide with death surprise. Bluecoat tracks crisscrossed the sand, a rogue patrol acting before Harrow's orders. Caleb staggered into the main camp, the crate still slung across his back, its weight now a curse. Taza stood by the council fire, face unreadable, as warriors wailed and women clutched children. Cale's knife gleamed, his voice a snarl. "Your truth brought this." Nalin stepped forward, her eyes blazing, not with warmth, but betrayal. "You spoke, and we still burn." Caleb's voice cracked. "I showed Harrow the smugglers. He's holding back, for now." Taza's staff struck the ground, silencing the cries. Nalin translated, her words like flint. "Your truth delays death, not stops it." "What now, white man?" The fire's glow danced on their faces, and Caleb felt the valley's weight. His failure, their loss, a boy's blood on his hands again. If this story of grit and ghosts tugs at you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who loves a tale where truth fights to breathe. Stay with us. The desert ain't done with Caleb yet. Taza's staff struck the earth, its echo fading into the night, leaving Caleb Rourke to face a truth heavier than the smoldering ashes of the Apache camp. A boy's death and a tribe's trust hanging by a thread. Winter's chill crept into Red Rock Valley, 1874, the Sonoran air sharp with frost and the bitter tang of burned hide. Caleb stood before the council fire, his breath clouding, the smuggler's crate at his feet like a guilty offering. Nalin's eyes, once searching, now cut through him, her silence louder than Cale's accusations. Taza spoke, voice low as distant thunder, Nalin translating with a steel edge. "You delayed death, but it came. You will not run again." The elder's gaze shifted to his daughter. "Nalin will bind you to us. She is your wife now, not a gift, but a chain." Caleb's heart stuttered, the word off a weight he hadn't braced for. Murmurs rippled through the camp, some angry, some resigned. Kyle's hand twitched toward his knife, but Nalin's raised palm stopped him cold. "It is done," she said, her voice flat, duty swallowing any trace of choice. Caleb met her stare, seeing not a bride, but a woman tethered to her people's survival. He set his colt on the ground, its metal glinting in the firelight, a surrender to a fate he didn't choose. "I stay," he said, voice rough, "for them." Days bled into weeks, the camp a taut rhythm of survival. Dawn brought women grinding corn, their pestles thudding like heartbeats, while warriors scouted for game under cliffs that glowed like cooled embers. Caleb, no longer bound, but never free, worked among them, his hands learning tasks his cavalry days never taught. Nalin was his shadow, not by warmth, but decree. She showed him how to read the wind's shift for water, her fingers deft as she traced damp sand in a dry wash. "Feel the earth," she said, her tone clipped, no patience for his fumbles. "It speaks if you listen." Caleb tried, his calloused hands clumsy against her precision. He repaid her lessons with his own, repairing a wagon's axle under rare rain, the wood slick and stubborn. Nalin watched, saying nothing, but her nod was grudging approval. Their exchanges were sparse, silences thick with unspoken debts. One evening, as they gathered mesquite pods, Caleb's question slipped out. "You learned letters in Tucson. Why stay here, where every day's a fight?" Nalin's hands paused, pods spilling like small secrets. "Because my people bleed without me. Words don't stop bullets." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp. "You should know that." The camp's rhythm faltered when scouts brought word. The smugglers were back, circling like coyotes, their rifles traded to rogue bands, stirring trouble beyond the valley. Taza called a tense council, the fire's glow carving shadows on weary faces. Kyle urged a raid, his voice a blade. "We strike first, or they choke us." Nalin stood, her braid glinting. "Strikes bring soldiers. We need terms, not blood." Her gaze landed on Caleb, heavy with expectation. "He speaks their tongue. Let him try." Caleb's throat tightened. He was no diplomat, but her trust, fragile as it was, pinned him. They met the smugglers at dawn, on a flat, scarred by wind and hoof. Caleb and Nalin stood side by side, Kale's warriors hidden in the rocks above. The smuggler chief, a wiry man named Voss, smirked under a sweat-stained hat, his men cradling rifles. "Valley's ours for the taking," Voss drawled. "Hand over your stores, or we burn what's left." Caleb stepped forward, voice steady. "You want to fight? Harrow's men'll here. I told him your mark. They're watching." Voss's smirk faltered, eyes darting. Nalin spoke, her English clear, cutting. "Leave, and we stay quiet. Push us, and you lose more than rifles." The standoff stretched, dust swirling like a held breath. Voss spat, then signaled his men to back off, their retreat a slow grudge. The valley exhaled, but the cost came clear. Taza agreed to cede a northern ridge, sacred but barren, to keep peace. As the camp packed to shift south, Caleb felt the weight of that loss, heavier than his colt. Nalin, beside him, tied a bundle, her fingers steady. "This is survival," she said, not looking at him. Not victory. Night fell, the fire low, and Caleb saw Nalin's silhouette against the cliffs, her strength a quiet anchor. He was bound to her, not by love, but by a shared fight, one he couldn't walk away from, even if the desert let him. Nalin's silhouette faded into the dark, her words about survival lingering like the desert's unyielding pulse, binding Caleb Rourke to a fight he could no longer outrun. Spring of 1875 breathed cautious life into Red Rock Valley, the Sonoran earth stirring under a sun less cruel than winters past. Wildflowers, stubborn and small, pushed through cracks in the red stone, their yellows and purples a quiet defiance against the dust. Caleb stood at the camp's edge, his hands rough from months of labor, the weight of his colt replaced by a hammer and a new rhythm. The Apache had shifted south, their lodges now huddled under lower cliffs, the ceded northern ridge a scar in their story. The air carried mesquite smoke and the faint laughter of children, a sound that felt both foreign and anchoring to a man who'd known only ghosts. Caleb worked on a new wagon frame, its wood creaking under his mallet, each strike steady but heavy with thought. The camp had changed him, not into one of them, but into something less adrift. Nalin moved nearby, her steps light as she taught a group of children to trace letters in the dirt, her voice firm yet patient. She'd taken to teaching since the move, her Tucson schooling a bridge for the young to navigate a world that hungered for their land. Caleb watched her, noting the braid that swung as she crouched, the way her eyes softened when a child grinned. Their bond, forged in necessity, had grown into something unspoken. Not love, but a trust carved from shared scars. The valley wasn't safe. Scouts whispered of smuggler tracks circling again, their greed unslaked by the ridge's loss. Taza, frailer now, leaned on his staff at councils, his voice still a current that steadied the tribe. One morning, as Caleb hauled water from a hidden spring, a shout broke the calm. A young warrior, Jaira, stumbled into camp, blood streaking his arm from a smuggler's bullet. "They're back," he gasped, "demanding our corn, or they'll burn the fields." The camp froze, mothers pulling children close, warriors gripping knives. Caleb's hammer dropped, his pulse a war drum. Nalin's eyes met his, not accusing but expectant, as if the desert itself waited for his move. Taza called a council under the noon sun, the air thick with dust and dread. Kyle, scars taut with fury, demanded a fight. "We bleed them now, or they take all." Nalin stood, her voice cutting through the heat. "Blood calls Harrow's men. We offer terms, but we stand ready." She looked to Caleb, her gaze a challenge. "You faced them before. Speak again." Caleb nodded, his throat tight. He wasn't their savior, but he was theirs, bound by Nalin's chain and his own debts. They met the smugglers at dusk, on a rise overlooking the camp's new fields. Caleb and Nalin stood forward, Jira and Kyle at their backs, warriors hidden in the brush. The smuggler, Voss, leered, his men fewer but bold, rifles glinting. "Your corn or your lives," he spat, boot grinding the dirt. Caleb's voice was iron. "You take nothing. Harrow's scouts are near, and I know your roots. Back off or you're done," Nalin added, her English sharp. "We've buried enough. Test us, and you join them." Voss hesitated, eyes flicking to the shadows. A tense beat passed, then he cursed, signaling retreat, their figures fading into the twilight. The camp exhaled, but peace was a thin thread. That night, by a low fire, Taza summoned Caleb and Nalin. His eyes, clouded but piercing, held them both. "You stood as one," he said. Nalin, translating, her voice steady. "The valley keeps you, but it demands payment." He pressed a carved stone, a hawk worn smooth, into Caleb's hand. "You carry our truth now." Caleb closed his fingers around it, the stone warm, heavy with meaning. Nalin's gaze softened, a rare crack in her armor, and for a moment, the firelight made them more than survivors. Months later, as summer loomed, Caleb repaired a child's toy cart, a girl tugging his sleeve with a shy grin, offering a red stone etched with a bird. The camp no longer stared. It nodded, some with warmth, others with grudging respect. Nalin, now a constant at his side, worked nearby, her laughter rare but real when a boy misdrew a letter. Taza watched from his lodge, his nod a quiet seal. Caleb understood. Belonging didn't erase his sins. It tethered him to their cost, a daily reckoning under the valley's red gaze. The dust of Red Rock Valley settles, but Caleb and Nalin's fight for truth lingers. Did they pay too high a price for peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Caleb's boots? Your voices keep these stories alive, and I'm grateful for every one of you riding along. Let's meet again under the next desert sky, where new tales wait. If you're hungry for more stories of grit and redemption, tell me what moved you most below. The frontier's still calling.